Then we'll just say we don't need to even discuss it, because it's already, that's what you wanted to find out about it.
Oh, yeah.
It's been passed.
I thought we had decided against it.
No, I think I actually asked Josie about it, and I think she went and found it for me. You're good to go. I motioned to come back into committee of the whole.
Second.
I have a motion to come back into committee of whole from Councilman Lundin and a second from Councilman Merrill. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. That motion carries 5-0. So we're moving on to E5, mobile food unit rules and regulations, continued discussion. So basically, this was, the discussion we had the other day was to give direction for staff because we didn't have direction. And we have a few questions that they had kind of asked us to answer. And I think we're basically bringing it back because we just kind of answered it for the time being, but we wanted to talk maybe more in detail about it at a committee of the whole meeting.
Correct, Mayor
Okay.
and Council. So we did look for direction, went by consensus to process an application that came in because it wasn't clear. So now if there was to be some clarification, in the language of the chapter, that would be ideal for staff. Not that we want another ordinance change, but to make sure that we are doing what council desires.
So you had a few questions that were on that cover page, basically. The first one was, how should food service buildings, which is not defined within the chapter, be interpreted? So I think, part of that is that, and I think we talked about this last time, was, Quick Trip sells a lot of food. Is that a food service building? Rendezvous sells food. Is that a food service building? What qualifies as food service? I mean,
Well, and I would recommend using, I think that language, that terminology, food service building, was borrowed from another city, because we don't have that anywhere. And I think that the best thing to do for definitions is to match what you currently have in zoning, so there's no confusion. So we use, like, Quick Trip would be a convenience store, even though they have food. That's what they are within zoning. Or you have a restaurant, like, that's used very widely in our zoning, but nothing says food service building.
I think that's the way we change it to it.
so you want to just change it. So, the food service building is the language in our
It's
in our ordinance for the foods, but you think change it to restaurant instead of food service
That would be
building.
my recommendation.
And
because then
restaurant would be
restaurant's already defined.
Defined as what? So rendezvous would be a coffee shop or what, I don't know what you define that as, but I mean,
Yep, and that does have a different category.
that's different than a restaurant, yeah, okay.
And I think the one thing that was in question was the distance from that building.
Yeah, so that was, so, well,
If
Josie's
it's a
work, so
multi-unit,
how should the 150 feet distance be calculated from the food service building or restaurant when the establishment is within a strip mall or a multi-tenant building?
I still think it should be from the building. That building is the specific address, and there's suite A, B, C, or 1, 2, 3, or whatever. I think it should be from the building.
So do I.
Plain, doesn't matter if the restaurant is on the north end and the vehicle's on the side, it's 150 feet from the building. I think, to me, it makes just as much sense. If it's 150 feet from the building, then nobody can complain.
And so if we want to do, have it be from the building, then we would just clarify in the ordinance that it also applied to multi-tenant and/or strip malls, however we want to say that, so it's very clear.
yeah.
Yep,
But
that's what it
I
was.
just don't agree that if you have 4 suites, that there is a restaurant on the one end, but is considered the whole building.
The
That
address
to
is
me,
the
I don't
building.
think. Yeah, but you're only one portion of
Doesn't
that
matter.
building.
The address is the building.
Well, and I agree with Jeff, actually.
So I think it's from
I
the
mean,
front door.
It's,
And then if you
the only
wanted-
thing I would say is that if you're in a strip mall, you should negotiate a non-compete. I mean, Subway has a non-compete. You're not gonna get a food unit probably outside there because they would come after their landlord for that kind of a situation. So I would tend to agree more with Jeff on that if it's 150 feet, I mean, if you are in that strip mall space, that landlord should have the right to utilize his property and his space the best that he sees fit.
True.
And if you didn't negotiate a non-compete, then, you should have done that. So, I mean, I think that's where I would come down on it, but
I think I read it and I thought the language was good. You had a draft of the language in there, correct?
I mean, we
That
could,
you
we could make the
recommended.
distance further if you don't think 150 feet is far
Yeah,
enough.
And I'm
I mean,
perfectly
that's
okay
another,
with that,
that's
but-
another side of it
Okay.
that,
But
you know,
I-
that you could also
150 feet
look at
isn't
it.
very far.
It's not very
That's
far,
pretty dang close. 150 feet, that's,
but, I mean, I get the intention by the 150 feet is to give distance from the restaurants that we do have, so I mean, I don't know,
I just think if it's a multi-unit suite type of deal, it's from the front door of where said business is. And then you can talk about how far you want to go with it. But I just don't think if it's multi-suite that a restaurant that's on the east end is considered the whole building when there's other businesses in there.
yeah, especially if it was like a huge shopping mall or
Oh,
something.
yeah,
You never know,
exactly.
yeah.
You know, imagine Maplewood Mall having a restaurant on the one side, but it's
They're
considered.
saying Maplewood Mall.
All right.
oh, but
just
that's a fair
saying.
point,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
How big and I get it, we're in
But they also
Isani.
make you go into the food court too.
Yeah.
right.
So there's a big
I,
difference.
I don't think 150 feet is enough.
No,
I
and
guess
we
I never
can-
thought about that
We
approach.
just need to figure out how do we clarify from the front door or the building, and then you talk distances. So let one step at a time.
Because there's businesses in town that would say any feet from their business is
Too close?
too close. So 150 is really cutting it. I mean, that's not very far.
So I did include an example language statement in the memo there. That was looking at other cities. You can see it went from very small from what we have, but just kind of elaborates, so it kind of addresses the distance, but it addresses how you measure. And I'm going to guess that these cities who have this language probably we're in the same spot we are in now, where someone's like, tell me exactly how to measure. So it does say from the primary entrance to the front door. Primary entrance is the door along the street where the restaurant is physically addressed. So, but you can read that whole quote, or you probably already did, at the end of that memo. And then in zoning, we have restaurant defined multiple ways. There's restaurant carryout, drive-in, drive-through, fast food, and sit-down. Establishments where food is usually ordered by telephone or prepared on the premise for consumption off the premise with no seating other than provided on the premise for consumption, so it's just carryout. Then you have a drive-in, as I mentioned, fast food, and then sit-down. An establishment whose principal business is a sale of food and/or beverage to customers, which are consumed at tables located on the premise and where the taking of food or beverage from the establishment is purely incidental.
So that would, so
if we
rendezvous,
use if we use the word restaurant, it would cover all of those types of restaurant businesses already defined in code.
so rendezvous is a restaurant then because it says food or drink.
I think we do have them as, yeah, we have a coffee house, which
but
they
they
can
sell
also make food, but let me pull that, look at that one.
Well, that means it's the same thing according to what you just read.
Well, food, was it food and drink?
Food
or
and drink.
Well, not food,
An
not food
informal
or-
restaurant primarily offering coffee, tea, and other beverage, and where then other non-alcoholic refreshments and limited menu items may also be sold. So it would be covered under that restaurant. If it was a coffee house, it would still have to meet that distance and measurement.
Coffee house would too, so.
Yeah, because it's a type of restaurant.
So see, then you're talking about if 150 feet, I mean, if they wanted to have a food truck over at Federated
Federated,
Co-op.
they wouldn't be able to.
Well, I mean, you probably could on the far end of the parking lot, but I mean, are you really gonna, you know what I mean? It's,
Yeah.
and I don't wanna, I don't wanna talk you guys into much of anything here on this particular topic either, because it's, you know,
The way it's rolled up looks nice. It's whether you wanted to move.
Yeah, I thought it sounded good too when I read it. From the way that it was defined from the main entrance, I thought was good.
I do feel like we maybe, when we passed this, did we make the 150 feet? I feel like it was longer in the, like the ordinance that we pulled the stuff from. Like 150 feet was shorter than what you might see in other cities.
Believe it was 300 feet
That's what I
most
was
of the
gonna
time.
say.
That's what I thought
Yeah.
too.
And then also other ordinances often do allow for that with permission from the restaurant. So just a consideration too.
Yeah, they're gonna solve the problem. Go back to the 300 feet without,
'Cause
with
I'm
permission
pretty
from-
sure that,
With
yeah.
permission of the
Are-
previous restaurant.
I don't believe that we did change the 150 feet. I recommended in the new language that we discussed for events to do 500 feet, because that wasn't
Yeah.
in ours.
But see, that 300, Stephanie, I think that is what you see in other cities fairly often.
It
Yeah,
is a
we-
common
We
one,
did
but-
300 when we were talking about the cannabinoids and the CBD.
Well, and I think when we did, because that helped, we get the ordinance passed for that in Clearwater, yeah, and I think they did 300.
I can get on board with 300, and then if a restaurant wants to,
Give them the okay,
Give
then
the
that's
okay.
different.
It does have 500 for that.
still gives.
But, I mean, I don't know, if maybe 150 is more of the standard, I don't know. I mean, 300 is, then you are talking about, well, Federated, they'd have to get permission from Rendezvous, you know, I mean,
But Warren probably wouldn't give them a problem doing it
well,
anyway.
no,
It's
but
a
I mean,
different style of food,
right,
different thing. I mean, he sells some eggs and maybe some soup and sandwich, and that's about it. You know, and then rolls.
yeah.
Most people don't go in there for breakfast or lunch or whatever, they're just going in to get coffee, so. He's just got it as a convenience.
But, I don't know.
I think we should maybe get some more input on the feet requirements of most cities. Because our whole point of making this available and doing these changes was to make it easier for food truck people, so they didn't have to get.
And we didn't change the 150 this time. I'm talking about when we passed it, I don't know, 2020, I think, or something like 20,
Oh, I can.
probably 2019.
Okay.
But that's what I was talking about, that we didn't change it from anything that we had passed. It's just when we were discussing it, it was originally, I think, was 300, and then I probably suggested, well, maybe it could just be 150, would be my guess. But,
That sounds about right.
sounds like something I would do.
It does.
But that doesn't mean anything, I'm just saying that I feel like at the time that was,
In 2020, it says mobile food units are prohibited from vending activities within 150 feet of a food service building or 500, it's the same language.
well, no,
2020.
we passed it originally with the 150, I'm just saying that when we had kind of, because I mean, every ordinance that we take in, we take and say, okay, how do we want to make this our own, right? And it's kind of a standard, you know, fill in the blank kind of a thing.
I think we should,
And I think at that time, it was the 300, but we changed it to 150 to make it shorter, but,
I would like to make the recommendation that we see what other cities are doing. And then go based on that if it needs to be changed. I think the language in here is good for the door stuff. I mean, it is kind of, I go back and forth on the building or the door, but I think the door keeps it the simplest. I think it's the door for the cannabinoid stuff. Isn't it the door from a school or on stuff like that too, or is it the?
We define that to be the front entrance door. I mean, you have to define it, otherwise
Yeah.
it's going to be, the people are going to wonder.
I think that is the most,
I think that stays consistent with everything
Yeah.
else, yeah.
although I get the building aspect of it too, so.
And then that last bullet that I wanted to point out was with the owner permission and site plan requirement removed to make it easier, a little more flexible for mobile food unit applicants. It is difficult for staff when we're processing the applications to know if they're going near a restaurant or not. So in that one that we just recently had, there was a very small area they could go that would be within the 150 feet. If we didn't even know they were going there, we wouldn't know that there was a conflict until someone would make a complaint. So just so you're aware of that, whether we want to do anything about it or not.
And I think
That would
that's
be
fine,
good,
if
but-
the business doesn't make a complaint about
Then
it,
they don't care.
they don't care, you know, so.
I agree.
Well, what do you guys want to do here? So, I mean, I think that answers the questions as far as how we're defining that stuff. I mean,
I have a question, Jimmy. I was thinking about something. since you have both a store and a food truck,
Yeah.
there's nothing in our ordinance that says, like, if you own a store, you can have a food truck operating within your 150 feet. Is that something that would ever be something you'd ever do?
Well,
No.
that wouldn't be him anyway, it's his own business. He isn't competing against himself.
Right, but our ordinance, I guess I thought that was from
I
left
would
field.
look at that completely in a whole different gamut. If it's Jimmy's Pizza and Jimmy's Pizza's food truck, it's the same company. And he's selling, in the store, he's selling the pizzas to go out the door, but if he parks his food truck in, he's selling them by the slice. Because they're being made in the store, brought out to his food truck. That isn't even the same.
I just didn't
same
know if
thing.
that was ever a thing that food truck people or businesses might do, like, but then it would probably be a special event, like, if you didn't want a bunch of people in your store, you know, you'd probably have a special event permit, I suppose. I'm just trying to think of every angle on this,
Well,
because
how
I don't
about-
wanna keep coming back to this
How
damn
about
food
this
truck
one?
ordinance.
Because Jimmy's Pizzas are franchised. What if a franchisee that was mad at Jimmy from another state came in with a food truck and planted their
See, there we go.
Huh? We can dirty the waters
That we
here.
have all worked out, and typically, well, we do all licensed stores now, but typically on that, it's at least 2 miles separate the two. And that's, I mean, if you were in a metro area where you're going into more like a C-store or something, that's kind of what that distance is, but with the franchise, you're talking, I want to say
restrictions in there?
5 miles or something like that. I mean, I don't remember what it is anymore, but it doesn't come up because you're not going to give the franchise to somebody that's going to hurt a different
right next to
franchise that you already have, so,
Okay.
you know, and you're not required to let
Is that-
somebody do that, you know, so.
Does that include the food trailers?
Well, yeah, it would, so. But, I mean, you're saying if I wanted to open Jimmy's Chinese food or something like that, in a trailer, is that what what you're asking, or?
No, I was just thinking it, because you have both, and I didn't know if
I
there's.
probably
any
would call it
any
something more creative than Jimmy's Chinese food.
I didn't know
but
if there's any situation where you would consider using both, and we don't have that in our ordinance.
Not
Okay.
really,
Okay,
no.
fair enough.
I have done it before, actually, when we had, our oven, wasn't working, and we ended up cooking out of the truck just as an emergency type situation, but that was years and years ago. But no, I think, yeah, I mean, so yeah, I mean, what you guys, I mean, I guess the last question is, you know, okay, it sounds like the consensus is, and you said building, is the door or the building, I mean, is that?
Door.
Do you think door, just keep it simple? You guys okay with that, or what do you think?
I'm only one up here.
Yeah. And then do you want 150, or what are you thinking
I
for
want to
distance?
see what other cities
like
are
this-
doing.
I've
see
been
where we-
doing a little research, and I
Okay.
found 2 cities who have 100 and 2 who have 200, and one that has 400 from the similar type of restaurant.
Okay.
So, just,
I mean, 200.
yeah. And 3 others had 150 besides us.
What'd you say?
And 3 others had 150.
So 150 was the most common?
Yes, and
Okay.
I mean, it's right in the middle of the 100, 200 too, so
Right.
I think it's pretty common.
Right.
But I know we're struggling for sit-down restaurants here, so, you know, what's reasonable? 150, 200? It's,
I'll say 200. But like I said, there's 4 others of you up here voting on it, so.
I'd go 200.
I can go 200.
George?
Well, then I'll say the 150, but,
The one thing I want to ask, not that I want to ask a follow-up, but I'm going to. So if the ordinance does change, and assuming that it passed and it's in effect, I know that takes some time, would the people who had filled out an application and got their license or permit, which one? License for a year, are they still good within 150? If we change it, just kind of trying to think in my head
I thought they
long-term.
weren't, I thought they
We
didn't
wouldn't
have to
be
buy a
sending them
license for a year.
PD notice to them that they had to move, correct,
That all
or?
got changed too.
I don't think you can backdate it.
Josie,
I don't.
Steve said they don't have to buy a license anymore for a permit, do they?
No, we still do license, we just don't ask
We
for
just don't.
very much information.
Okay.
There's no fee.
And did this
But it's
other
still
place
application.
purchase it for a year, or did they not?
Well, they've been doing them for a year because there's no charge.
Well, I don't think you can go back against it,
No,
Right.
no, that
but
would
if
be
they go to
wrong.
apply for it next time, then it comes in effect.
Okay.
If they already have it in place for the year, till that year time is up, then that's it.
Or whatever they state on their application, but okay.
Whatever
I
they
just wanna
say on
make
their
sure we were clear
application.
on that.
Or,
Okay.
yeah, whatever they say in the application.
But don't give them add a year on it for them. I mean, if they're only getting it at a year at a time, that's as long as they could get it. I mean, you can't go back. I mean, that isn't fair. I don't care who you are, that isn't fair to
Agreed.
them.
Right, okay, and I agree, so then, but even at that point, even when the year is up, we'll wait if there's only a complaint from the business that they're too close or something, correct? Because we won't get the site plan.
What if
Where
they
their plan
move
go.
from a location that was within 150 or outside the 150, but,
They don't have to
and
tell
then
us
they,
that they
and then they want to
moved.
come back again?
Then it'll
If
become
be-
back a complaint.
Someone
Well,
would have to make a complaint because they don't have to tell us where they're going with the
Right.
most recent change.
but if they had the annual permit saying that there was 150, then are they good for the whole year, even if they leave and come back?
If they move, I would think if they
I would think, yeah, because their permit isn't for the number of days that they'll be at that site.
Mm.
The permit was good for a length of time to come and go within that length of time.
But we don't ask what site they're gonna be at. Do we?
No,
Right.
Correct.
you can't.
It's
you
just
can't
they're good to
see
be
Jaden, her head
operating in the
below
city
thing.
for that
I
year.
can see ya. She's she's stretching.
So they'd be able to be for the time that they filled out got that license for, any location in the city.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the gray area. I mean, you don't have to give a site location, that's where it becomes gray. That's why I've always said it's best to know where they're at than not. But
It's challenging, challenging industry, but I always, I mean, I still think, I mean, that if you've got a better mousetrap, then you should be able to use it. I mean, it's, if you got a better, otherwise, everybody could go into food trucks, right? I mean, if it's a better way to go, then do it that way, but, and I think it is the better way to go, so.
For the distance, Mayor, could you ask and go through the line so we know what the consensus is?
That was 200 was the consensus
Okay.
with one at 150.
Okay, thank you. Was the rest of that language, though, and that verbiage,
I thought it was good.
okay?
I
I
thought it
mean, it
was
was
good.
really specific,
Yeah,
and we are doing to the door, not to the edge of the building.
I thought
or
it was
the
good.
business. Okay, and then how do we feel, since we're already making changes to the ordinance, instead of calling it food service building, we call it restaurant?
Yep.
Yep.
All right. Any other changes to that? Staff will work on making a draft change, and we'll send that out, because if there is anything else that comes up and we need to talk about it before we start posting the ordinance, you'll have an opportunity to do that. So maybe we'll send that out the end of next week or the following week to ensure that we have everything covered, but I think we do.
Sounds good. All right, moving on to E6, increasing public hearing notices to 700 feet. I thought we had already done this. I really did.
We did it for one project from,
Really?
but did
Yeah.
not do it as a,
Was it just one?
Yeah, it
project?
was like,
Yeah.
let's send it to 700 on this one, because it's important. It was the park, the Whisper Ridge, I believe.
No, but I felt like,
it
I
was a
thought we had
different
done
one
it.
previously last year that we,
Oh.
we
I think if it's for an assessment.
Let's just move it over to 700.
Yeah.
I would, before we do that, I would like to see the cost difference between 700 and 350 on average. I know it's totally different
Yeah.
on every single
Got it in
one.
there.
it is, I just have the most recent ones in here.
I didn't see that.
And so it did cost on average 3 times more
Oh, yeah. I
on
did
both
see
of
that.
them. And did take staff substantially longer, since it was one from 15 parcels for one specifically to 48 parcels for the other, or
go to
for the
700, you got
extension.
less
So it is substantially larger circle, so just to keep that in mind, so we'd have to change the budget for that. And then it did take almost an entire day then versus just a couple hours to do all of the mailing. Because we have to double check every address and that it's the owner, so we don't just get to use the GIS. We have a lot of property sales going on, so we have to make, we
Why-
double check.
Why can't we just do resident at this address?
We do, but because we have people, they change hands, we have to double check a few places. We use our GIS and the county GIS, but sometimes we get new water bills, so we know that they're changed, so then we double check it off of,
Yeah, but what he's referring to is
It
just
just says resident,
at this address.
just
Oh,
anybody who
resident
lives
at
there,
this
just send it
address.
to that address and that's it.
but sometimes it's not, the owner doesn't live there. Like, so like sometimes we have vacant parcels, so it's, we send it to that address or the
renter
primary
and the
resident,
owner,
yeah.
As well as some have a PO box, so we cross-reference with who has PO box.
Or a
It's not just
property
physical
management
address.
company.
The one thing, other thing we could, maybe to consider on this, because as you see in the memo, we do have to change this in 7 places to be within the zoning and subdivision code. You can just do it by vote by project
Yeah.
on what you see as fit. Maybe it doesn't, maybe it's not necessary for all. If we change it in here, that means that staff has to do it for every and all public hearings. Like, take for example, the ones today that we had at planning commission for the lot and for wintergreens, those would have had to been done at that 700 if we change it in here, every single public hearing notice.
I think we should change it on a as-we-need-it basis.
That would
Just
be-
make sure that's a thing that we specify, that, hey, this is under 350 feet. I think you did that the last couple, because I thought the one for wintergreens for me, I mean, it's within 700, but not 350, and we really didn't care, to be honest.
That's fine.
And
I guess I'm good with
sometimes
that. Let's just leave it
sometimes
as
it
is.
doesn't
Yeah.
matter, like, in a residential area, like in some parts of town, the houses are a lot closer, so it does matter a little more. But in other areas, it doesn't, like, there's a lot of streets and empty parcels, so that 700 feet, there's a good buffering that it doesn't impact the people. So it just kind of depends on the project.
I think for the case of just leaving the ordinances the way it is.
That's fine with me.
Yep.
Yeah. I just had thought that we made the decision to always do it that way when we, like, second or third month of,
We might have talked about it, but
we
we didn't
must have,
decide on
yeah.
that.
Yeah, because we
Probably
wanted.
for the same reason, we didn't want
Yeah,
to change the
but I think
ordinance.
doing it as an as-needed basis is probably fine. So E6, or E7, I mean, so Steve had give me this that you give him, that they can already bow hunt on that land? Is that right?
Signed by Jeff.
Well, this map here is basically that same land right behind, because we had talked about,
Just south of Martin's Landing and going all
Yeah.
the way down to the end of like Iron.
Parkland, you can't hunt on city parkland.
no, okay. Okay.
So we've had a couple changes.
Yeah, it says no hunting shall take place within 500 feet of any city park boundary. So, see, that's what I thought, we has decided not to, because that, yeah,
City park boundary. And I
So-
just think we should still stick to that.
okay. Yeah, I had a resident ask me who lives, I don't know if you guys can see this over there, but he basically, this is the property that he was wondering about, was this section south of Martin's Landing. And he has a house kind of right here that comes up on that. So Jeff, it's kind of out right here, basically. But he was just asking about deer hunting back there, and I don't know how many acres that, we talked about it, I don't remember how many acres it was, but,
This was
Yeah, I
the
think it did
River
meet
Bluff, this was the River Bluff Preserve Park along the river. And that's where we, back when Mayor Johnson was, that he signed this at that time, back, I don't even know when it was.
that was more if you had.
November
you-
of 2021. But that was all encompassed in, that's where they could hunt. That's where we designated them they could hunt back then.
But that's not what that says there, I don't think.
Yeah, it does.
It says you can't hunt on.
That isn't that isn't park, city park.
Yeah, I suppose, is it? I mean, it's
That
not.
is a city park.
It-
All
But
of
that was the
Riverbrook.
area that we designated that they could hunt in.
I'm going to defer to the chief. It's
That
his
request that the resolution was based on was 5 east of town on a 60 or 80 acre parcel.
Yeah. I remember.
That was what that was the request, that was the discussion, was based
Yeah.
on.
And we allowed that, so if
That's
it
where we had
was
the
40 acres or
40 contiguous
more.
acres,
Yeah.
yep. Yeah, that's when that was from. And
But
they went-
that, how big is that property? Because so it's basically just that, there's, the DNR land is kind of up there around Martin's Landing, and then there's south of that, there's area that's just woods and, just frontage to the river, basically, and I think it's, I feel like we talked about 17 acres, or, I don't remember what it was,
Say
but
it's 38 total, but.
38 total, but
Um,
does that include the
whatever,
the
yeah.
actual, like, River Bluff Preserve Park
Yeah,
too?
That includes that upper part, yeah.
Right, which we don't want anybody hunting up there, but we, you know, down in the lowlands, that's where he
We
was
also-
wondering about, but.
Yeah,
I do get calls regularly to requests from people all over hunting on the land, especially spring, summer, as they're
We,
planning for there. And so I think when cities do allow hunting on their land, they end up having a lottery of sorts because of
the county park board, we've been talking about this at length, because we acquired a new property that's like 700 acres, and people hunted on it previously, but then you get into the legalities of it and trying to do a lottery that's fair, and then neighbors aren't sure, like that area especially, somebody could be shooting into their backyard, and you don't know who's hunting there, so when you have a public lottery like that, I don't think it's a good idea, especially with houses abutting that property back there. If it was if I was a neighbor and I heard somebody was bow hunting back there, I'd be pissed.
well, we do have a trail back there too, so you'd have to post it that people wouldn't be allowed to walk the trails of a public park, which I
Yep.
think gets a little sticky because
We do that as a county too.
paid with taxpayer dollars and
Yep.
they're not allowed to use it, so.
We have to shut down our park for basically all of hunting season. But it's the least used park we have, but then it's only open to, like handicapped. So it's a Cable Partners hunting program is what we did. So if we were to do something, the only way I would be okay with it is if it was only handled by someone like the Cable Partners Club, or for, veterans or kids or handicapped or something like that, because that's the only way you can really, do it. Otherwise, you got the whole community's gonna wanna hunt there for free. Why not, And I think that's a nightmare that we don't want our city staff to have to deal with.
And mayor and council, just from previous experience, I've worked a lot with the metro cities that do their hunts. And Ramsey County Parks has probably the best program, but they're doing for population management. They have their population management plans. They do their aerial surveys. So when the residents are saying, why do we allow, because we know there's people that will be okay with it, people not. Why do we allow it? They can come up with the data with their own biologists to say, this is why we're doing it. And they're doing it from a totally management standpoint because it's the only tool they have other than hiring sharpshooters to come in at night. So that's the prime example of how they can portray that in the metro cities is for that. We don't have the resources to even pretend to do that.
No.
Yeah,
And then neither does the
And I
county,
don't
that's
think-
why
and
we
we
ain't
don't have the
partaking
issue
in it.
And we don't have the issue,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I said I'd bring it up, and so that's why I bring it up. It's 19 acres is what I had in my notes here, it looks like, from before.
It would be different if it was all his own land, but it's not.
Well, maybe that's not right, though. That might have just been what I was guessing. I might have,
It's,
yeah, no, what do you guys think?
yeah.
So you couldn't, you would have to limit the amount of people in each day. You can't have.
And you talk about
can't just
liability.
Make it open.
I mean, I don't think you're gonna have a huge run. I mean, there's a lot of other places to hunt, but,
You'd be surprised.
I mean, it potentially could happen. It's not that big of a space. I mean, you could, if you had a lot of people, 10 people wanted to go out on one day, that would be a pretty tight quarters in there, so, I don't know. Yeah, Jeff, what do you think?
So you just leave it alone.
Okay.
That's my 2 cents.
All right, well, fair enough, we tried. Too slow in the cul-de-sac, this was another resident had emailed me about, cul-de-sac on Cardinal Court for E8 here.
Did you say too slow in the cul-de-sac?
That's what he meant to say. Caution, drive slowly.
Caution, drive slowly is what I meant to say. This is, you guys brought this in, I guess, right? So, something like that is what I was picturing. I mean, just, how often can we use these advisory signs? Because,
So one thing I'll let the chief speak on that, but one thing we would want to consider is we do have a resolution still that it's never been repealed that says we won't do advisory signs that council passed. So if we do want to permit advisory signs such as this or the neighborhood, we have a specific resolution for neighborhood watch, that's different, but
Okay.
for like the kids ones and stuff like that, we may want to consider repealing that resolution. if we
well,
can.
we've already gone against that with the signs on all the population
Well,
signs too.
Yeah, that
'Cause
was
that would-
for residents were asking to put up the kid
Oh.
signs.
So I
Gotcha.
had two residents in the last week ask if they could put up a, children at play sign, or if
Yeah,
they could
those
pay
signs
for it for the city
specifically.
to put it in or whatever. And I forwarded them Josie's response. One of them said sounds like it's too many hoops to jump through for it to be worth it, which I don't think it really is. I mean, it sounds like it maybe to the average person, but I think people want to do that. I mean, I know on Birch, when I was younger, I still remember there's a sign there that says, children at play or deaf child, or I think it's deaf child on Birch there, and I still remember that one to this day. I don't think they go on, unnoticed, but I think if a neighborhood wants to pay for it, or a person wants to pay for it, and it's not costing us anything, it's, yeah, or that's where I'm at with it. If
Yeah,
there's no
Children at
tax
Play
cost,
and
then-
Watch for Children were the specific ones in this 2012 resolution. Just something I wanted to bring up, that we probably should repeal that if we do allow something similar or that.
I think we should, and we should just allow people to come in and ask if they're gonna cover it, or if their neighborhood wants to cover it, then we allow them to do it.
And it depends on where you're putting them. I know that
Oh,
would be Jason Cook's
It'd have to be approved, yeah.
would be what signs can be on what signs, right? You can't like have it on a stop sign, I mean.
Right.
But I do know that, if Jason was here, he could give us that information.
And putting the Jason engineer hat on just for a minute, he would say that it doesn't follow MUTCAD standards and that he doesn't recommend them because it gives a false sense of that people will do that, but
So what triggered this?
Just a resident asked me, so,
I've had two people ask me if they could put up a children at play sign in the last week. It was to do with the speed limit. As soon as that speed limit, the 25-mile-per-hour post went out, people were really vocal on it. People were messaging me about it, and
Go up to Menards, go buy one of those little kids.
I
that
told her
sign
that, I told her
fences
put it
and
in her driveway as long, or her
What were
yard
they
as long as
asking
it's off
about?
the easement. What's that?
what did they ask you about, or what was the feedback? They liked that we put the speed limit down to 25, or no?
They, there was quite a bit of feedback that said that we need our police to enforce the speed limit, but the signs hopefully will help. And then they said they asked, well, we don't think that sign's enough, and we want to do our own sort of, yeah.
Well, they can enforce the speed limit now at 25 instead of 30. I
Right,
mean,
right.
yeah, I mean, that's the whole point of
I-
why we did that. is-
Correct.
Yeah, so,
My neighbors just go buy one of those little green guys.
Yeah,
with
and put
the
it
yellow
out there.
Flag in there, and they put it in the road, so.
That's illegal, but, I can't recommend somebody does that, but,
They're a little rebellious, so.
yeah.
okay.
guess we'll
so
have to
do you wanna
readdress that.
Pull the resolution. Does anybody want to pay for putting the sign up on Cardinal Court, or do you say pull the resolution that says they can't and then suggest that they do it themselves
Correct.
Yep,
with,
that's fine with me.
but I mean, we'll need to finish all that before, what do you think on that?
well, it's different, I think, if they put in the little kid that you buy that shows like kids at play that you can put in your yard. I think that's different as a movable thing than if, we're not gonna give people permission to put a street sign up, or are you saying we would?
No,
Oh, I
we-
don't know.
okay.
I mean,
They would come in and ask us to put up a sign, but they would cover it. So our Public
I
Works
see.
guys would put up the sign, we would charge them for the sign post and the sign in half an hour, or whatever it takes, so say $300 to put up this sign, or just whatever it is.
Yeah, I think that we would just, I would write a new resolution that would state that something that the council finds in the city's best interest to allow certain signs by request as reviewed by the council, or something like that.
Yeah.
And would repeal this one in that same resolution, and then you do it on a case-by-case
That's what I think we
basis.
should do.
I agree.
And then do we cover the cost, or we say the residents
No,
have to?
residents.
When we did the neighborhood watch, the residents paid for those signs. We allowed them to put them up, or we put them up actually as Public Works, but they did cover the cost, is my recollection. I can look that up to be 100%.
Yeah, I
we
think
cover
that's
it-
what it was.
If we cover that cost, every single street in the dang city is gonna want a sign. And then you really get sign blind.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think if they see the value in it, then, yeah, I mean, it's,
Up to them or their neighbors.
yeah, I think that's fair. So I think we should try to have, if we're gonna do that resolution, then maybe we have like a price structure in there, and, I mean, I don't know, something like that.
To have the city pay for it?
Well,
No,
No.
what it would
Them.
cost.
So they know,
so they would pay us to go put it out, is what the idea was,
like a
I
fee
think,
schedule.
right?
Yeah.
Schedule for it.
Yeah, I think when we did the neighborhood watch, it was just a reimbursement. We said this sign, this size, which met our standards. We put it in our location that we found appropriate, and we just said it was, I don't remember it exactly, but something like $36 per sign.
Okay. So, yeah,
So
so you'll
that's
put
kind of-
something like that in there?
I can, yeah.
It would be nice to put a rough price, even if you overshoot it, up to,
Well, yeah, we
up
can
to
just put
$400 is
actual
what.
costs
it's- Yeah,
in there to cover
because then they have an idea, well, what's a street sign cost? Does it cost $20 or 2,000? And something, you know? I would have never thought street signs and the posted cost as much as they do myself.
We're gonna try to get this other one in.
Yes, yep. Okay, well, I think that sounds like a plan there. Parking along Isani Parkway, this was another resident had asked me about. There's a lot of curves
Someone asked me about the same street.
on Isani Parkway.
Mm-hmm.
Was it Paul? Or not Paul, but Greg? Or
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so another person then.
Yeah, how wide is the street?
Well, it's probably fine in the straightaway parts of it, but it's in the S-curve where it gets to be an
And I'm gonna
issue.
throw on my Jason engineer hat.
What'd you say?
Yeah,
Oh,
that
we
one,
did change it before,
that
in the
design
past.
standard actually was already as part of that design plan, 25.
Yeah.
It is narrow,
So the
and
park-
I'm gonna, Jason's probably gonna say, if anything, they can only park on one
Well,
side.
I
or the
think
other.
Correct.
that's what they're, that's what
That's
they're
what-
asking for.
Then that's what we should do.
There's a lot of people that park there on both sides, which
Yep,
is,
and I,
but,
even
but
my
he said that
road,
they got a lot of people, kids there that'll come in and out of the cars, and they're,
Yep.
and they're just,
Ironwood Avenue, same thing. I don't think that road's wide enough for cars parked on both sides, and they park on both sides. Kids are playing in the street, which I don't complain about. I'd rather them there than breaking into somebody's house. But they can dart in and out of those cars
on
and,
certain streets, people aren't going that fast either, but that street, it is kind of you're trying to get through there, and I don't know if it needs to be the whole street by any means. I think it could just be in those S-curves where it's.
if it's a narrower street, I still think they should only be parked on one side or the other. Cause it's a bugger to even try to get a car through there, and if
Yeah.
you meet somebody else when they're parked on both sides,
Right,
it even makes it tougher.
yeah.
Are people doing it on purpose to get cars to slow down?
Oh, I don't think so, no.
Oh,
But,
the perceived,
Hey,
Uh,
that's.
traffic
bring-
calming.
Yeah, exactly.
If we do want to add any section of that street, to no parking, it would be an ordinance change to chapter 227.
And I think we should look into it.
Should we maybe send a mailer out to that street and see how they feel about it before we do it?
You've already got residents complaining, I'm sure they all talk to each other.
I think it was Greg.
was it the
Yeah,
same?
yeah, Greg Shish, yeah,
Yeah.
okay. I was trying to remember, I was like, yeah.
And then we'd have to pick which side.
We have
Greg
a-
isn't one to always complain.
No, he's
I know who
not.
you're talking about.
No,
He's
yeah.
not one to complain unless there's an actual complaint
I
being
know.
made. I know him very well.
Mm-hmm,
He just lost his wife.
I like Luke's idea, I think majority should rule, I realize it should get slowed down, but let's say 80% of that street says, no, we want parking on both sides, I mean, they're the ones that are parking there.
That's my
And they have
concern
the
too,
kids.
yeah, it's,
Should ask.
but they have the kids too, so,
And if they don't have kids, they don't care.
right.
I mean, that's, like I said, the only reason I push for sidewalks is to get the kids off the streets,
Well,
rather than
actually, I
walking
think
down
it was,
streets.
it was his son that was driving, and he wanted to be here today too, but they were on vacation, so. But I think it was his son actually that came to him and said, hey, Dad, this is horrible, we should do something about this. But his son was driving, not a kid playing, but his son was driving his car through there and had almost hit somebody or something like that, but I mean, a survey never hurts, I guess, I mean, if you wanna go through, it doesn't have to probably be the entire, I guess, I don't know,
So
it
from the
can't be-
intersection of Whiskey Road to, is it Blossom, Bel Air? Intersection of Bel Air?
Yeah, I think it's Bel Air,
S?
yeah.
Well, maybe it's more than that.
The S curve doesn't really start until you get further down, I forget what this,
Right at that Whiskey Road. Yep.
yeah, but I mean, you're thinking more the entire street.
I don't know. I don't know how far, I don't go down and drive around
know,
these
yeah,
streets.
right,
I got
right.
better things to do with my time.
I know you do. All right, do you wanna send a survey out, or you wanna just make a decision, or what are you guys thinking?
I think we should send a survey.
what point do we wanna choose? Cause we have to send it 350, right? So, there again,
Well,
that's,
no, that's for public hearings.
well, yeah.
If we're doing a
yeah,
survey,
right.
you can set the distance.
Okay,
That's,
yeah, that's true, I guess. Yeah,
we could try to send one to every home from that stretch of Whiskey to Bel Air.
Yeah, that's what I'm.
Because that's the people it affects, and also, I know Ladine was saying that a lot of them have kids. I'm thinking the houses that are parking out on the roads have kids, lots of kids, and that's why they're parking out on the roads.
could be two.
I'll tell you what, if you got kids, you don't want cars on there because the kid's always gonna dart out. That's not very smart thinking if that's the case.
But if they think they're gonna play in the driveway, cause you're trying to make room for them to play in the driveway, right?
Well,
Yeah.
it drives me nuts when people
But-
park in their driveway, not in their garage anyway.
We can speculate, but it all comes down to
Anyway,
what the
yeah,
people want.
Let's do a survey for
Do a
that.
survey. Do we
yeah.
also want to do a Facebook survey like we did the Parks one too, or you just
Yep,
want the residents?
I
mailed?
would, don't cost nothing.
Yeah, I think you might have a problem with people
You wanna actually know the residents who are
of
actually-
that specific one, yeah, which, can you believe I'm advocating against Facebook for something?
Yeah. No, I
No, make
can't.
note, 1019, just kidding.
Yeah, you know,
Oh, are you using my joke?
Yeah.
Josie, get your own material.
I motion to adjourn.
Hold on, we got one other thing, old business, Isani Fire Land purchase continued discussion. Do you guys have an update on that, or?
I do. Okay, so a lease is not possible, but I did check with the state again and just said, well, it's because they want to, I gave the whole situation and scenario. And she said our possibility in selling would require a conversion. So what that would require is we could sell the land to someone else for this purpose, but we would have to buy comparable land for the same value to be used for a park within the city. So if that makes sense. So they
so we
make
could
it,
sell it to buy a different one.
yes, basically that's the,
And then
our only option.
can we never sell that other property then too? Is there a,
Yes,
No.
then we're stuck with that property because then that goes to that end.
Because it has to go back to parkland.
Yep,
Yeah,
it has
yeah,
to be
I got it.
Land to turn it into
I
parkland.
understand.
And it has to be of the same quality and usability.
Well, that's
So-
gray.
Well, there's nothing there that you can use, but.
Right, but it's a grassy
One
flat
other,
area.
yeah, one other thing that, had been mentioned, I think, to me, was that, did the fire department, are you sure that that section of the parkland was part of the original section that
Yes.
was given to us?
Actually, what I also,
Well, here, because that, somebody had told me that the fire department had given that section to the city years ago. I mean,
it was
I
the
have no
other way
idea.
around, like,
Okay.
so what happened was, I actually got a question also, that in 1994, we wrote a grant for this entire parkland, which some of that we've then sold to the rodeo. And so she actually, it opened a can of worms, and she's like, but it wasn't clear if that land was transferred into conversion, can you find out that information for me? So I was just like, yeah, I'll look into it.
So we already
So-
broke the rules.
Darn,
years
we
back.
shouldn't have asked any
So-
questions.
I don't advise towards it because they obviously keep records, so just an FYI.
Well,
And we cannot, without permission, allow, because it's an outdoor use space, we'd have to get permission to enclose the entire space. So if we even decided to put like a public work shed there, we wouldn't be able to use it for that either. So that would also require conversion. So I got a list of reasons why we'd have to convert it.
So really, I mean, I think it's gonna net neutral us, but it'll benefit the fire department and the rodeo.
all they're really looking to do is push the front gate
Oh,
out
yeah.
further and have a building that would have a cooler in it, like they have in the back section, and I think there was talk that even if you could use the building as a pavilion of some kind for the city, that they would be okay building it and letting it be something that the city could use as
Oh.
part of the park too, you know.
There's another way
but-
around that.
Yeah.
Put it on skids, so it's not permanent, and you can always move it.
I was just at the Rogers Community Center today, and if they want to build us something like that in the parks with the big garage doors, I'm all for it.
Well, anyway, we'll pass that info back along and see where that conversation goes, so.
But yeah, just
thank you
letting
for
you
looking.
know.
Yeah,
So
thank you for looking
I
into
can forward
that.
that conversion information in the admin update if you guys want
Sure.
to read more about it.
Yeah,
Yep.
that sounds good.
Motion to adjourn.
I have a motion to adjourn from Councilman Lundin. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Jeff. I have a second from Councilman Holmgren. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. That motion carries 5-0. We are adjourned.